All right, today we are diving into one of the most powerful, and I mean truly powerful, ideas in all of modern history, nationalism. It's this incredible force that started out as a dream of freedom, but somehow ended up plunging an entire continent into war. So how on earth did that happen?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question we're tackling. How did an idea that was all about liberty and people coming together completely flip and become a reason for conflict and building empires? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we need to go way back to the very beginning, back to an artist's vision of what a perfect world could look like. Okay, so take a look at this. Back in 1848, a French artist named Frédéric Sérieux created this incredible print that just perfectly captures that original dream. You see all these people from all different nations in their unique clothes, all marching together, peacefully towards the Statue of Liberty. This wasn't about fighting. It was this beautiful, hopeful vision of a world built on freedom and, well, brotherhood.
So where did a dream like that even come from? Well, it was basically forged in the fires of revolution. We're talking about the big one, the French Revolution of 1789. This single event, this explosion, gave birth to a completely radical new way of thinking about who we are as a people.
Okay, so let's break it down. At its very core, nationalism is the idea that a group of people, folks who share a culture, a history, a language, that they form a natural community, a nation. And crucially, that this nation has the right to rule itself. I mean, just stop and think about that shift for a second. Before this, you were a subject of some king or queen. Suddenly, you're a citizen of a nation. Your entire identity, the way you see yourself in the world, it just fundamentally changed.
And the end game for nationalism? It was to create the nation state. This was the big dream, the ideal. A country where the political borders on the map perfectly line up with the cultural borders of the people living inside them. One people, one territory, one government. Sounds simple, right? But believe me, that simple idea had some seriously explosive consequences down the line.
So how did the French revolutionaries actually pull this off? I mean, they didn't just wake up one day and declare a nation into existence. No, they actively built one piece by piece. They came up with the idea of la patrie, the fatherland, and gave everyone a new flag to rally around. They pushed for one standard French language, getting rid of all the regional dialects. They created one set of laws for everyone. See, these weren't just boring administrative changes. They were powerful, powerful tools designed to melt down millions of separate subjects and forge them into a single collective French identity. Now, as you can probably imagine, the kings, the emperors, the aristocrats all over Europe, they were not exactly thrilled about this newfangled idea of people power. Not at all. And this, right here, set the stage for a struggle that would last for 100 years. The new idea of the nation on a collision course with the old world of monarchy. And stepping right into the middle of this huge conflict is one of history's most fascinating and, frankly, most contradictory figures, Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, this guy is a total paradox. On one hand, his armies are marching across Europe, spreading all these revolutionary ideas. But on the other hand, what does he do? He crowns himself emperor, basically crushing the very democratic dream he was helping to spread.
I mean, just look at his famous Napoleonic Code from 1804. This thing was absolutely revolutionary. It just swept away the old feudal system. No more special treatment just because of who your parents were. Suddenly, there was equality before the law, the right to own property. Peasants were freed from serfdom. It was a complete game changer. Napoleon was basically exporting the modern world at the point of a sword, all while building his own personal empire. Wild, right? Okay, so after Napoleon is finally defeated in 1815, the old powers of Europe get together and try to put the genie back in the bottle. They try to turn back the clock. But it was too late. The ideas he'd unleashed were out there, and they couldn't be unthought. So Europe was basically split down the middle between two huge competing forces. On one side, you had the liberals, this new, rising middle class that was getting rich from the Industrial Revolution. They wanted freedom, equality, and a government chosen by the people. And on the other side, you had the conservatives, the old guard, the aristocracy. They were desperate to bring back the monarchies and traditions that the revolution had almost wiped out. This right here, this was the heavyweight fight of the 19th century. So yeah, the conservatives might have won the battle at Waterloo, but they were definitely losing the war for hearts and minds, because that idea of the nation, once it was out there, it was just impossible to contain. It started to catch on, spreading like wildfire across the continent. And man, did it spread fast. First, you see it pop up in Greece in 1821 as they fought for their independence from the Ottoman Empire. Then, boom, France rises up again in 1830. And by 1848, it's not just a few sparks, it's a massive wave of liberal and nationalist revolts sweeping across pretty much all of Europe, from Paris all the way to Budapest. That hopeful dream was quickly turning into an urgent demand. But here's the thing, nationalism wasn't just a political movement about borders and governments. It was also this incredibly powerful cultural movement, and we call it Romanticism. It had a soul. Thinkers like Johann Gottfried Herder came along and said, look, a nation's true spirit, its essence, isn't found in the fancy courts of kings. It's found among the common people, the das Volk as he called them, in their songs, their stories, their language. And just like that, culture became a really powerful tool. You could even say a weapon in this fight for nationhood. A perfect example? The Grimm brothers. You know, the guys who wrote all those fairy tales? Well, it turns out they weren't just collecting cute stories for kids. No, they were actively going out, collecting these tales, and publishing them as a way to define and promote a shared German identity. They were reminding people of their shared cultural past. Whether they realized it at the time or not, they were literally building the cultural foundation for a political state that didn't even exist yet.
Okay, and this right here brings us to a major plot twist in our story. After those big, widespread liberal revolutions of 1848 mostly, well, failed, the whole character of nationalism started to change. That early dream of fraternity and brotherhood, it started to fade into the background, and it was replaced by something much colder, much more pragmatic. The old conservative guard, the kings and princes, they had this huge aha moment. It was basically, if you can't beat these nationalists, you might as well join them. Or even better, why not lead them? Really smart, cunning leaders in places like Prussia realized they could take all this nationalist energy and harness it for their own goals, to grab more power, to unite their territories, and to build incredibly strong centralized states.
And the two best examples of this new approach are the unifications of Germany and Italy. I mean, these massive new countries weren't born from popular revolutions bubbling up from the streets. Nope. They were forged from the top down by clever and pretty ruthless politicians like Otto von Bismarck in Prussia and Count Cavour in Italy. They used a calculated mix of strategic alliances and, well, war. All that cultural groundwork that the Romantics had laid, it was now being used, even weaponized by these hard-nosed realists. Nationalism wasn't a revolutionary dream anymore. It was a tool of the state.
And this massive shift from a liberal bottom-up nationalism to a conservative top-down nationalism, well, it had some really profound and really dangerous consequences. The idea was about to take its final and most tragic turn.
So, by the end of the 1800s, the great powers of Europe weren't just squabbling amongst themselves anymore. No, the game was bigger now. They were competing for global empires. And this new, muscular form of nationalism was the perfect excuse. It provided the justification. The logic was simple, and it was incredibly dangerous. My nation is superior, so we have the right, heck, maybe even the duty, to go out and rule over other, lesser peoples. And there was no place on Earth where this mix was more explosive than in the Balkans. It was a total pressure cooker. On one hand, you had all these different ethnic groups, Serbs, Croats, Bulgarians, you name it, all fired up with nationalism, all trying to carve out their own independent countries from the crumbling Ottoman Empire. But at the exact same time, you had the big European powers like Russia and Austria-Hungary, all meddling in the region, trying to expand their own influence. It was quite literally a powder keg just waiting for a single spark. And here, this is where we see the ultimate tragedy of this whole story. That beautiful idea that started with Frédéric Soryu's painting of people marching together in peace, it had twisted and morphed into its complete opposite. Celebrating us now seemed to require hating and dominating them. Nationalism was no longer a reason for unity. It had become a reason for war. And then, in the summer of 1914, that powder keg in the Balkans finally exploded. A single bullet fired by a nationalist assassin in Sarajevo was the spark. And that complex web of rivalries, all fueled by this aggressive new nationalism and imperial greed, finally collapsed, dragging Europe and the entire world into the absolute catastrophe of the First World War. And that brings us all the way to today, because, let's be honest, the story of nationalism didn't just stop in 1914. Its legacy is all around us, every single day. in the news headlines, in political debates, and it leaves us with a huge question to think about. In our super interconnected, globalized world, what does the nation even mean anymore? And maybe more importantly, where do you draw the line between a healthy love for your country and the kind of dangerous nationalism that leads to conflict? That's something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.